Now to a global perspective, Matt Brown is a visiting fellow at American Progress, which is working on building transatlantic and international progressive networks and studying transatlantic policy issues. He's got a pretty long CV, but I note here that he ran the international press office for New Labor's elections in 2001 and 2005, of course, were the last two that they won. So he's got perspective from that as well. I'll throw the mat.
Thanks very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank Nick, Tracy, and Matthew as well for the invitation. The job that I had for the longest that you didn't mention was actually that I was the director of the Policy Network, which founded the Progressive Governance Network. And I was thinking today when James said that the term progressive is part of the problem, then we were basically one of the main advocates for that. So we were a culprit in the decline of the political fortunes of social democrats. I think it's when we. The argument I want to make today is that the sort of economic fairness and work problems we're facing, particularly in Europe and North America, not so much here in Australia, are essentially reside or are caused by a fundamental flaw or a fatal flaw within the third way's economic paradigm, the economic paradigm that we pushed for much of the 1990s, that made if you want, a kind of lightweight argument that fairness and economic growth work together. But it was a very lightweight argument. It was an argument that was based essentially on a narrow economic ideology which was not that fundamentally different from neoliberalism, which we've heard being criticized here, and that was essentially solely meso- and microeconomic supply side policies were pushed forward. So my viewpoint on this is that as we look forward, this is where we have to move from what the third way pushed the idea of an enabling state. It had an enormous amount of faith in free markets, in financial capital, and the argument was what we needed to do was reform the state, reform the welfare state, make it more efficient, make it responsive to the opportunities that were going to be created by markets in the late 20th and early 21st century. So this was a strong emphasis on training, lifelong learning, education, linked with a kind of rights and responsibilities agenda, but with the put in the workforce and in the economy, basically that you were responsible for getting out there and seizing these opportunities. We would present training for you, but the job of citizens was to get out there and find work and thrive in the economy. So what happened when the global financial crisis hit was that we had a series of progressive governments that were in power, particularly New Labour in the UK, that had been complicit in the deregulation of the financial markets, had basically believed that boom and bust economics was over. And so when the economy crashed, when hundreds of thousands of people lost their job, nobody wanted to listen to what they had to say. The truth is that in the run-up to that period, there had been attempts within the New Labour movement and across other social democratic powers to sort of move beyond the traditional third way paradigm and to look at issues of industrial policy to deal with issues of aggregate demand. And while the G20 that was led by Obama and Gordon Brown at London, there was a strong effort to have a concerted stimulus package put forward at the global level, very quickly that dissolved. The Labour Party had lost its reputation for economic competence, and in the election after election in Europe in 2008, 2009, 2010, progressives lost power. And so quickly what's happened really is that, and this is the most worrying thing I think for progressives right now, is that a framework has emerged in which essentially what began as a crisis of banker irresponsibility and casino capital has morphed in the minds of the public into a very pervasive narrative that says this is really about a profligate state and about wasteful government spending. So we're now caught in a situation in much of Europe and in the United States where the idea that government can be the solution to the economic crisis is rejected. And the framing of the public debate, and it's a frame that increasingly progressives are accepting, is that what we need to deal with is debt and deficit, not jobs and opportunity. Now, I disagree with what James said earlier about how we respond to this. His argument was that all politics is local. I don't actually think this is a local problem. I don't think it's a problem that we can find solutions to simply at the national level or at the local level. This is a global problem of aggregate demand. It's a global problem of a predominant economic paradigm that is pervasive in the press, amongst much of the policy advisory community, and a framework that's accepted by a large part of the political classes and elite. So we have to push back strongly and harshly against this. And we have to do it not just in terms of defining a new growth paradigm domestically, but also in terms of how we restructure the global economic architecture and the institutions, the guidelines of the institutions that sort of determine how the global economy is run. Look at the IMF, at the World Bank, and other institutions. So I actually also believe that the central tenets of a new growth strategy are the same for us all in the industrialized world. We might currently be facing different situations. Australia has much lower, I mean, you're worrying about jobs, okay? You've got 5% unemployment. If you're sat in Spain, that's a luxury. The Spanish currently has, I mean, conservative estimates, 20% unemployment. That's 40% youth and 40% in youth unemployment. So, I mean, that's, yeah. The Spanish would consider what you have almost full employment. They'd be very jealous of your situation. And the situation is similar across Europe. So how can we do this? I mean, I think that one of the key areas is we have to start diversifying our economy. If I were sitting here in Australia right now, I'd be very nervous about how dependent you are on your minerals. It's fantastic that the price of your minerals are doubling and tripling year on year, and that you seem to be getting wealthier and wealthier. In the UK, we thought that was the same with our financial service sector. We thought that we could build a service economy. We thought we could live off thin air. So what we need to do is find a way that during the good times, we can diversify the economic risk, because I actually do think it matters. If you were running a portfolio as an investment banker, a good investment banker, not the ones that cause the problem, you wouldn't want to invest in just one particular issue. You diversify the kind of economic interests you were invested in. And I think any economy needs to do that too. So we need to be looking at sectors. I use Spain because I think Spain's an interesting example, because the wealthiest area of Spain is the area that invests in the newest technologies, in modern healthcare, in renewable energies, in green tech. That's Navarra. 100% of their energy comes from renewable sources. So what we need to be doing is actually, you know, it's not an ugly word to talk about industrial policy. It used to be sort of a faux pas amongst the progressive community to talk about industrial policy because they imagined the policies of the 1970s. Picking national winners, you know, wasting money. But we need to get back to that. We need to get back to creating new kind of investment opportunities where we leverage public funds in public-private partnerships, in renewable energies, in clean tech. We need to get out a lot more and push the argument for diverse societies and creative and tolerant societies. The work of Florida, for example, shows that the cities and cities here are the hubs of this growth. The more diverse, the larger the gay community, the larger the immigrant community, the more innovative those cities tend to be, the more creative they are, and they become hubs of growth. So we need to start getting out there and pushing these kind of policy agendas that provide new investment opportunities, but also create a different kind of social environment in which, you know, creative industries can thrive. And I think also, at the global level, we need to start advocating for the growth of a middle class in places like India and China. You can't divorce one from the other. The West, the industrialized world, will not continue to thrive. We will not restore long-term economic opportunity and security to the middle classes of the United States, Europe, and Australia if we don't grow a middle class and force the growth of a middle class in China and India. And this is a fairness issue. At our best, progressives have always been internationalists. We've always advocated for this. So I think, you know, James was wrong today to sort of criticize the kind of global networking. He was wrong because the challenges we face are actually more similar than we think. The central tenets of a new economic paradigm that we pursue will be very similar, and there's much that we can learn from the success and failures of the different initiatives that we try and start. And he was wrong because we have to restructure and rebalance the global economy and the way it's organized. I mean, the speaker just before was talking about the OECD and the IMF. The power of these institutions is phenomenal, to push amongst new leadership and train people to believe that there is only one way. And so really I don't actually think it's a policy problem, I think it's a political problem. It's a political problem about rejecting somebody else's frame. If you look at the work of people like George Lakoff, of Drew Weston, I don't know how popular that work is here, but it's how the frame, the language we use, the narratives and the stories that we tell, how they shape what is common sense and what is possible. And right now, yes, we seem to be accepting that efficiency and equity are in competition. So we have to push back. We have to push back with our own framework. One that says that the most important things is jobs, opportunity, investment. I mean, in some ways, your own presentation accepts it because you say we have to get away from sound fiscal policy. Well, you're accepting a positive definition of their positive definition that actually managing, balanced budgets and cutting deficits is sound. It's not actually sound. Yeah. It's irresponsible. But because we accept it's sound, we've already lost part of the argument. So I think we have to be very careful about the words we use and the arguments we make. Now, at the Center for American Progress, what we've done is we've tried to develop an argument around the idea. How much time do I have, by the way?
You've got a couple of minutes.
A couple of minutes. Okay. Yeah. So, about the idea of an opportunity state, which is a state that not just enables individuals to succeed, but actually creates the environment, creates the opportunities for them through public investment, through new forms of public-private partnership, through re-regulating. The role of the state, if we look at the role of the state versus the market, the role shouldn't just be to regulate market failures, it should actually be to create new market opportunities. Again, in the area of renewables, you don't create that market. That market does not come by itself. It has to be created. It has to be created by the introduction of feed-in tariffs, by the cutting of subsidies to big oil so that the unfair market advantages they have are reduced. We have to re-regulate financial markets. The cause of this problem wasn't really just about people buying houses that they couldn't afford. The cause of this problem was that essentially the financial market had become deregulated from the real economy, dislocated, from the real economy. So, from reality, but also from the real economy. The only point of having a financial market is the efficient reallocation of capital into the real economy. That's what any sound economist will tell you. Yet this has become a casino running off. So we have to re-regulate. We have to introduce that at both domestic level, but also at the international level, we have to sort of coordinate to ensure that speculation, transaction taxes, I think we have to revisit these ideas. Because this will then generate wealth. It will ensure that the wealth that is currently sitting in banks and large corporate accounts is actually being reinvested into the economy, creating opportunities, creating jobs. Because these jobs, we have to get the private sector and the banks back on side. And I think finally, we shouldn't be afraid of having a politics with enemies. I think that too much of what we've done, and this was certainly a problem within the third way, is that we wanted to be so in favor of aspiration that we didn't say people at the top who won the most had the greatest responsibility. And I think it's very, very hard for people to understand when there's 40% unemployment that we have a winner-takes-all economy, and we're not, somehow we feel we can't tax these people, we can't ask more of them. Okay? So I think we do have to have a much more progressive taxation system, even if the actual revenue that it raises isn't that great. Because it's a symbolic gesture about the fact that if you win more out of the economy, if you gain more out of the economy, you should pay more back in. So I'm not actually that pessimistic about our political chances in Europe and pushing forward this agenda. Right now, when the third way kicked off, 13 out of 15 member states of the European Union were held by progressive parties. Today, it's 4 from 27. But if you look at the degree of unease that exists amongst the European society with the response that the right is offering, then I think it's pretty clear that in the next year or two, there will be a swing back in progress. So the question becomes how prepared we are for that. I think that if we're clear that we think that we should be taxing the wealthy more, that we should be using public funds to invest to create employment, that we should be introducing transaction tax to make sure that irresponsible, massive global flows are cut and limited, and that those funds themselves are used to reinvest back into the real economy, then I think we'll have an agenda that people believe in. If our agenda is that actually, no, we can't do that much, that we are just sort of like the softer face, the slightly more enabling state side of the neoliberals, that national decline will be managed more slowly under us, and that the best days for the workers are actually behind them, then I don't think there's any reason for them to vote for us. But if we reject that framework, if we put forward a positive vision and we show how we can invest back in the economy, I think we can win. And I'll leave it at that.